when I first arrived at Mount Carmel, there were a lot of houses down a long road with a building up front that we did our studies in. And my children and I were put in one of the houses. We may have even been with Jaydean Wendel and her kids in one of the bigger houses. But it was close to the barn at the back. So I remember we had a long walk to get up to the study building or to go get food, things like that. We would eat with others, so we would walk up and down that road a lot. We did a lot of walking up and down the road. The kids even rode bikes up and down the road. Brian has a scar on his eyebrow right now because of falling off a bike when he was a baby and hitting something and scratching his head. I mean, they had cuts and bruises and scrapes just like other kids. They had time to play, they had friends, they had each other. My boys were a little bit older. They were 6, 7, 8 years old, and they got to ride bikes around and play with little race car things that they would push around. We even had at one point a big sand pile that when we were building the new building, we dug out trenches and used to run our race cars through it like it was caves. And they had that one summer, that last summer before the end, when we were all playing, the boys had mini bikes, and my oldest two got to ride their mini bikes with Cyrus and Joseph the most, and they rode across the berm area by the lake that was like a little ridge. And we would take walks around the lake. We did a lot of Sabbath walks too, just to enjoy nature and enjoy the flowers. There was always a lot of flowers in the field, and we did that. So even though I homeschooled my children, they had a lot of time. Their homeschooling was structured. It was very specific hours of the day, Monday through Friday, and then when they were done, they would get to go play. They had chores, of course, too, but most kids do. And then they would have playtime, and they would get to read or do something that they wanted to do. No, they didn't have computers and electronic devices, but this was back in the early 90s. That wasn't a common thing anyway. They played outdoors. That was what they enjoyed doing. They built a tree fort. They built a little house in one of the trees that the guys would help them build, and they made one so well, and then all the girls wanted it, so they had to give it to the girls and go build another one for the boys. But they really enjoyed their time. They really enjoyed playing with each other. They each had specific friends they liked more than others. I remember Joann, Vaega, and Heather Jones. Chrissy really liked them and hung out and played dolls with them. Jaydean Wendel's children, they used to play with them a lot. I think my favorite people I want to mention are definitely Jaydean Wendel and Cita Sonobe. Her children were Angelica, and the littlest one was Crystal. And they were just dolls, just sweethearts, and everyone loved them. Everyone loved all the children. The Martins had a lot of children, and there was Sheila and Lisa, Daniel and Kimmy, that were always out playing with my kids. And the Sylvias, Rachel and Joshua, were playing with the kids. It was a general theme of everybody did their own thing for whether some of them went to a local school, an elementary school, but when I arrived in '89, I just wanted to homeschool my children. I didn't want to send them to another school that I didn't think was really up to standards anyway. They were going to be teaching them social things like the Easter Bunny and things that just really weren't, it was a waste of their time. I wanted them to learn math and reading, social skills, but history and arts, things that were actually going to be useful to them in adulthood. So that's what I taught them when I homeschooled them. But they also got to do things that they wanted to do. It wasn't just all work and no play. They did get to do what they wanted to do. One of the things that my kids really enjoyed was Floyd Houtman. He had a chopped off finger or missing finger or something, and he used to play with the kids, and he was funny. He played jokes and played with the part of his hand that was still there and would pretend like he pulled off his thumb or something. There was different people that did different things with them that they really enjoyed. And they enjoyed the adults to the essence of what that adult brought to them. Like Mike was a drummer, and I remember that a lot of the kids used to want to play with Mike's drumsticks. Scott picked him up a lot and really enjoyed playing with the drumsticks. He would get a little pad and start banging on it. One of the things I used to do with my children was read books to them, and like Sesame Street books, and become Cookie Monster and read in extravagant voices. And they really loved that because I had the ability to, even if it was the first time I'd read a book, I could read ahead in my mind and then prepare myself to speak the words in a way that they would really find fascinating. There was no monotone reading from me. And it was even to the point where everybody else's kids would come and say, "Can we listen? Can we listen?" So I had a crowd of kids around me as I was reading Cookie Monster voice stories. There was a lot of elements that they really enjoyed, and I can't express enough that these children were not abused. I mean, I can't speak to Carrie Jewell or people in California. I was in Texas. The experience I had was strictly in Texas. And for the most part of that, it was as a mother of children who babysat other people's children even. But from what I experienced and what I saw, yes, there was discipline, but there was never any abuse. There was never any neglect. People took care of each other. If any child got hurt and come running up a sidewalk, they would find an adult and they would get taken care of. They would get their boo-boos taken care of. That's the way a community living does, and we took care of each other. And I don't think that kind of confidence that these children had in everyone in the group is something that anybody in the world can say they had. One time we had a little garden behind the big church, the big chapel building that we had built, and I loved potatoes. I still love potatoes. So I planted potatoes, and I used to work in the garden a little bit here and there. Sometimes the kids would come work in the garden with me. One time, Scott really wanted to help me dig the potatoes up because it's time to eat them now. And he spent 2 hours in the garden with me digging up potatoes. But my children are very fair-skinned. It didn't bother me at all. I'm from Florida. I'm dark already. Scott got burnt, sunburnt, really bad. And I didn't really realize it at the time. It took time for it to manifest. But he had to get severe medicine for some really bad shoulder sunburn that he had on him from just 2 hours in the sun. And I'll never forget that. It's just, my kids were white-skinned and freckled, and I just had to really think about letting them be outside and making sure they were well covered up so that they didn't get burnt like Scott did that time.